My name is Catherine Williams. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. If you had met me just 8 months ago, you probably would have thought my life was perfectly normal, maybe even enviable. I was a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, Colorado, married to my college sweetheart, David, and mother to 2 beautiful children, Emma, who just turned 9, and little Jake, who's 5 years old. To everyone around me, my days seemed full and meaningful. I spent my shifts caring for sick children, coming home to help with homework, preparing family dinners, and managing the endless cycle of school activities and weekend soccer games. Yet beneath this seemingly peaceful surface, I was drowning in questions that kept me awake at night. Was this routine existence all there was to life? Did my daily struggles and small victories matter in any cosmic sense? What happens when we die? Do we simply cease to exist? Or is there something beyond this physical world? My story. I carried these doubts silently, afraid that voicing them might shatter the careful balance I'd built. Every morning, as I drove through the Colorado foothills to work, watching the sun rise over the Rocky Mountains, I'd try to push these thoughts away. But during my lunch breaks, sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria, they would return with crushing weight. I would watch the families in the pediatric ward, parents clinging to hope, children fighting battles no one should have to face, and wonder where God was in all this suffering. If He existed at all, why did innocent children have to endure such pain? My faith had been slipping away for years, like sand through my fingers. I'd grown up Methodist, attended Sunday school, even taught vacation Bible school as a teenager. But somewhere between nursing school, marriage, and the harsh realities of pediatric medicine, my beliefs had eroded into uncertainty. David noticed my restlessness but didn't know how to address it. We'd lie in bed at night, both scrolling through our phones instead of talking, the distance between us growing wider despite sharing the same mattress. He was a good man, a devoted father, but he lived in the practical world of engineering blueprints and budget spreadsheets. My existential crisis felt foreign to him. I never imagined that an answer, profound, terrifying, and beautiful beyond description, was waiting for me just around the corner. That an ordinary pediatric nurse like me could have her entire understanding of reality shattered in a single moment. And I certainly never believed that I'd find myself standing at death's door, my soul separated from my body, only to return with a message that would transform everything I thought I knew about life, death, and our purpose here on Earth. Before I take you on this incredible journey, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that quiet longing for something more? That sense that there must be a deeper purpose behind your daily routine? If you relate to this restless searching, know that you're not alone. Life in Denver. Denver is a city caught between earth and sky. The Rocky Mountains rise like ancient guardians to the west, while endless plains stretch eastward toward the horizon. My life, though set against this majestic backdrop, had become a carefully choreographed routine that I followed almost mechanically. Each morning began with the sound of little feet patting down the hardwood floors of our suburban home, followed by Emma's voice calling, "Mom, I can't find my backpack!" and Jake's inevitable announcement that he didn't want to eat whatever I'd prepared for breakfast. David would leave early for his job as a civil engineer, usually with a quick kiss on my cheek and a promise that we'd talk more later, though somehow that conversation never seemed to happen. By 6:30 a.m., I'd be in my car, commuting through morning traffic to the hospital, my mind already shifting into work mode. My days in the pediatric intensive care unit were emotionally intense. I cared for children with conditions that broke my heart. Cancer patients losing their hair from chemo, accident victims fighting for their lives, babies born with complex medical conditions that would challenge them forever. I took pride in being their advocate, their comfort during frightening procedures, their family's source of hope during the darkest hours. But secretly, I wondered if I was making any real difference. Would these children remember the nurse who held their hand during a scary test? Did my presence truly matter? Or was I just another face in their medical journey? Family life. Family life was loving but complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. David and I had met in college. He was studying engineering while I pursued my nursing degree. We'd fallen in love over late-night study sessions and dreams of building a life together. For the first few years of marriage, those dreams felt achievable. But parenthood brought challenges we hadn't expected. Emma was strong-willed and brilliant, questioning everything, demanding explanations for rules that David and I sometimes struggled to justify ourselves. Jake was sensitive and intuitive, picking up on tensions between his parents even when we thought we were hiding them well. Weekends blurred into a montage of grocery shopping, cleaning, birthday parties, and youth soccer games. Even our rare date nights felt forced. We'd sit across from each other at restaurants, both checking our phones, struggling to find conversation that went deeper than logistics and schedules. I felt like I was playing a role: devoted wife, caring mother, compassionate nurse. But the real Catherine, the one with doubts and fears and existential questions, felt increasingly invisible, even to myself. My parents lived in Fort Collins, about an hour north. Mom was developing early signs of dementia, and Dad was overwhelmed trying to care for her while maintaining his pride. They needed more help than they were willing to accept, adding another layer of guilt to my already heavy load. Spiritual searching spiritually, I felt like I was wandering in a desert. My childhood faith had sustained me through college and early marriage, but the harsh realities of pediatric nursing had shaken my beliefs to their foundation. How could a loving God allow a 3-year-old to suffer from leukemia? Where was divine intervention when parents wept over their child's hospital bed? Why did some children recover miraculously while others, equally loved and prayed for, didn't survive? I envied colleagues who seemed certain of their faith, who could comfort grieving families with confident words about heaven and God's plan. I wanted to believe, desperately. But my prayers felt like they bounced off the ceiling, unanswered and unheard. David wasn't much help in this area. He'd grown up in a family where religion was more cultural than personal. He was happy to attend church occasionally for social reasons. But he viewed my spiritual crisis as an intellectual puzzle to be solved, rather than a deep wound that needed healing. Still, something inside me refused to give up hope entirely. Maybe it was seeing the resilience of the children I cared for, or witnessing the fierce love of their parents. But I couldn't quite let go of the possibility that there was something more to existence than what science could measure and explain. I kept searching, reading spiritual books during my lunch breaks, listening to podcasts about near-death experiences and unexplained phenomena. Part of me hoped I'd find a sign, some evidence that consciousness survived beyond physical death, that love was more than just biochemistry, that my life had meaning in some grand cosmic sense. I never expected that sign to come through my own death and resurrection, the day that changed everything. Sometimes life pivots on the most ordinary moments. Mine was a Tuesday in late September, one of those perfect Colorado autumn days when the aspen leaves were just beginning to turn gold, and the air carried that crisp promise of winter ahead. I remember rushing out of the house that morning, juggling my purse, lunch, and the stack of continuing education materials I'd been meaning to read. Emma needed her permission slip signed for a field trip. Jake couldn't find his favorite stuffed animal. And David was already in his car, engine running, late for an important client meeting. The morning shift at the hospital was particularly challenging. We had a 4-year-old girl who'd been in a severe car accident, her family keeping vigil by her bedside for 3 days straight. I spent most of my time with them, bringing coffee to her exhausted parents, reading stories to distract her during painful procedures, and trying to project hope when I felt my own faith wavering. That afternoon, my supervisor asked if I could stay late to help admit a new patient, a 6-year-old boy with complications from heart surgery. I agreed, as always, too committed to my patients to say no, even though I was supposed to pick up the kids from after-school care by 6 p.m. By the time I finally left the hospital, darkness was settling over Denver. The September evening was crisp but pleasant, and I decided to take the scenic route home through the residential neighborhoods instead of the busy highway. My mind was processing the day's events, worrying about the little girl in the ICU, thinking about Jake's upcoming parent-teacher conference, wondering if David and I would actually have time to talk tonight, or if we'd collapse into bed exhausted and distant as usual. That's when it happened. I was stopped at a red light, lost in thought, when I noticed headlights approaching from behind in my rearview mirror. They were coming fast, too fast, and not slowing down. The impact was devastating. My small SUV was crushed between the speeding truck behind me and the car stopped ahead of me. The sound was horrific. Metal grinding against metal, glass exploding like deadly confetti, the screech of tires and brakes that couldn't stop the inevitable. In those first seconds after impact, time seemed to slow to an impossible crawl. My mind raced through 1,000 thoughts simultaneously. This can't be happening. I need to get to my children. David doesn't know where I am. Who will take care of my patients tomorrow? The physical pain was intense but strangely brief. I felt my ribs crack, my head snap forward and back, warm blood trickling down my face. My vision blurred, sounds became muffled, and a strange numbness began spreading through my body. Then came the moment I'll never forget as long as I live. I felt my spirit separate from my physical form. The moment of death. The transition from life to death wasn't what I'd expected. There was no dramatic revelation, no tunnel of light, no life review in those first moments. Instead, there was simply a gentle letting go, like falling asleep after the longest, most exhausting day imaginable. The pain vanished instantly. The sounds of the accident, sirens, shouting voices, the hiss of steam from damaged radiators, faded to a whisper. All the worries that had consumed me moments before, my patients, my children, my struggling marriage, my parents' declining health, suddenly seemed distant and somehow less important. I found myself floating above the accident scene, looking down at the twisted wreckage that had been my car. Emergency responders were working frantically around a figure I slowly realized was my own body. Paramedics were performing CPR, shouting medical terminology I recognized from my nursing training. No pulse for 3 minutes. Starting another round of compressions. We need to get her to Presbyterian St. Joseph's immediately. I watched with detached curiosity as they worked to save the life of the woman who had been me. My body looked small and broken, nothing like the Catherine Williams who had been rushing home to her family just minutes before. But I wasn't afraid. That's what still amazes me about those first moments after death. Instead of terror, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace and freedom. It was as if I'd been carrying an invisible weight my entire life, and now it had finally been lifted. Above me, the night sky began to transform. The stars grew brighter, more numerous, and seemed to pulse with life. The boundary between earth and heaven became permeable, and I felt myself being drawn upward by a force that was both gentle and irresistible. As I rose higher, I became aware of a presence, vast, loving, and infinitely patient. It was like being embraced by unconditional love itself, the kind of perfect acceptance I'd been searching for my entire life without realizing it. But the journey upward, the ascent through what I can only describe as layers of reality, was unlike anything I could have imagined. Each level brought deeper peace, clearer understanding, and more profound love. The earthly concerns that had consumed me, bills, schedules, medical crises, relationship tensions, fell away like old clothes I no longer needed. Colors became more vivid than anything I'd ever seen. Music filled the air, though it wasn't heard with ears but felt through every fiber of my being. It was harmony itself, pure, perfect, and alive with meaning that transcended human comprehension. I began to understand that I was more than flesh and blood, more than the roles I'd played as wife, mother, and nurse. There was something eternal within me, something connected to the source of all love and light in the universe. As I continued upward, I became aware of other presences, beings of light who radiated joy and welcome. Some felt familiar, like distant relatives I'd never met but somehow knew. Others were clearly guardians or guides, ancient in wisdom yet eternally youthful in their essence. They communicated not through words but through direct transmission of thought and emotion. I understood that they had been watching over me throughout my earthly life, celebrating my moments of compassion, grieving during my times of doubt, always hoping I would recognize the divine spark within myself. Then, in the distance, I saw a figure approaching through the golden light. Even before I could make out features, my soul recognized him with absolute certainty. It was Jesus. The encounter with divine love. His presence was unmistakable, not because of any physical description I'd read in scripture, but because my spirit knew its creator. He radiated love so pure and complete that it made every human emotion I'd ever experienced seem like a pale shadow by comparison. Jesus was both exactly as I'd imagined and completely beyond my imagination. His eyes held the depth of eternity, ancient wisdom combined with infinite compassion. When he looked at me, I felt seen in a way that went beyond recognition. He knew every thought I'd ever had, every fear I'd carried, every act of kindness I'd performed, every moment of doubt that had plagued me, and he loved me completely. "Catherine," he said, and my name spoken in his voice was like hearing the first word ever uttered in the universe. It carried the weight of divine intention, the joy of perfect recognition, the tenderness of a parent calling their beloved child home. I wanted to fall to my knees, overwhelmed by his holiness, but he reached out and took my hands in his. His touch was warm, real, and filled with such love that tears I didn't know I could still shed began flowing down my face. "I've been waiting for you," he said, and I could hear both welcome and sadness in his voice. Welcome for our reunion, sadness for what he was about to tell me. "Am I dead?" I whispered, though part of me already knew the answer. "Your earthly body is failing," he replied gently. "But you have a choice to make, my precious daughter. You can remain here with me in perfect peace, or you can return with a message that my children desperately need to hear." That's when his expression grew more serious, though no less loving. I could see the weight of divine concern in his eyes. "They have forgotten," he said softly. "My children have forgotten that love is stronger than fear, that hope is more powerful than despair. that every soul has infinite worth in my eyes. They are drowning in division, consumed by anger, lost in the darkness of their own making. The vision of Earth's condition. As Jesus spoke, the golden light around us shifted, and I found myself able to see the world as it truly was. Not just the physical realm, but the spiritual reality underlying all human existence. What I saw broke my heart. I witnessed the deep loneliness that plagued millions of people, even those surrounded by crowds. I saw the fear that kept individuals trapped in cycles of anger and judgment. I observed families torn apart by pride, communities divided by mistrust, nations locked in conflicts that served no one. But most painfully, I saw the spiritual poverty that had infected so many souls. People were starving for meaning, desperate for connection, yet they had forgotten how to love unconditionally. They had replaced worship with consumption, service with self-interest, hope with cynicism. I saw children growing up without understanding their inherent worth, teenagers contemplating suicide because they couldn't imagine a future worth living, adults medicating their pain with substances and behaviors that only deepened their emptiness. The darkness was real, spreading like a virus through human consciousness, convincing people that they were alone, unloved, and without purpose. But then Jesus showed me something else. Points of light scattered throughout the darkness. These were souls who still remembered their divine nature, people who chose love over fear, compassion over judgment, service over selfishness. Each act of genuine kindness created ripples of light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. I saw nurses like myself, holding the hands of dying patients and offering comfort in their final moments. I witnessed teachers pouring their hearts into struggling students, parents sacrificing for their children, strangers helping strangers without expecting anything in return. "This is why you must return," Jesus said, his voice filled with urgent love. Every soul who remembers their divine nature becomes a beacon of hope for others. Every person who chooses love over fear helps heal the spiritual wounds that plague humanity. The message for humanity. As I stood in the presence of perfect love, Jesus began sharing with me the message I was meant to carry back to the world. It wasn't complex theology or religious doctrine. It was the simplest and most profound truth in the universe. "Tell them they are loved," he said, his eyes shining with compassion for all humanity. Every person, regardless of their mistakes, their fears, their current spiritual condition, they are loved beyond measure. This love is not something they need to earn or deserve. It simply is, because they are my children, created in the image of divine love itself. I felt the truth of these words resonate through every part of my being. The doubts that had plagued me about my own worth, the questions about whether my life mattered, the fear that I wasn't making a difference. All of it dissolved in the light of this unconditional acceptance. But they must remember, Jesus continued, that with this love comes responsibility. They are not just recipients of divine love, they are meant to be conduits of it. Every choice to forgive instead of holding grudges, every decision to help rather than hurt, every moment of choosing hope over despair, these are sacred acts that heal the world. He showed me how interconnected all souls truly are, how every human action creates ripples that affect the entire fabric of existence. A harsh word spoken in anger doesn't just hurt its immediate target. It contributes to the darkness that separates souls from their divine nature. Conversely, every act of genuine kindness strengthens the light that connects all beings to their source. The division they see in the world, Jesus explained, is an illusion created by their focus on external differences: race, nationality, religion, politics, economic status. But at the soul level, there is only one human family, all sharing the same divine spark, all equally precious in the eyes of the Creator. I understood then why my work as a pediatric nurse had felt so meaningful, even when I doubted its significance. Every child I had comforted, every family I had supported during their darkest hours, these acts of love had contributed to the healing of the world in ways I never could have imagined. The reluctant return. Standing there in perfect peace, surrounded by unlimited love, the thought of returning to my broken body filled me with dread. Why would I choose the pain, struggle, and limitation of earthly existence when I could remain in paradise? As if reading my thoughts, Jesus smiled with understanding. "I know what I'm asking of you, Catherine. To leave this place of perfect love and return to a world of suffering. To carry a message that many will dismiss or ignore. To face challenges that will test your faith and resolve. It's the hardest thing I could ask of anyone." He gestured to the scene below, where paramedics were still working frantically to revive my body. "But consider your children, your husband, your patients. all the souls you have yet to touch with the love you've experienced here. Your earthly mission is not complete. I thought of Emma and Jake, who would grow up without their mother if I chose to stay. I thought of David, who, despite our recent distance, was a good man who deserved the chance to experience the kind of love I had just received. I thought of all the sick children who might benefit from a nurse who truly understood that every soul is precious beyond measure. If I go back, I asked, will I remember all of this? Will I still feel this love, this certainty, this peace? The memory will remain, Jesus promised, though it may sometimes feel distant when you're dealing with earthly challenges. But the love you've experienced here, that love will live in your heart forever. It will transform how you see yourself and others. It will give you strength during difficult times and wisdom to share with those who are searching for meaning. He placed his hands on my shoulders, and I felt divine power flowing through me. Not my own strength, but his authority, his love, his passionate concern for a world in need of healing. Go back and live differently, he said. Love more deeply, judge less harshly, serve more faithfully, and most importantly, help others remember who they truly are, beloved children of the Most High God, created for purposes beyond their current understanding. I looked one last time at the beauty surrounding us, trying to memorize every detail of this perfect place. Then, with a heart heavy with both purpose and sorrow, I nodded my agreement. I'll go back, I whispered. I'll tell them about your love. The violent return. The journey back to my physical body was traumatic beyond description. One moment I was standing in perfect light with Jesus. The next I was being slammed back into a form that felt foreign and broken. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Every nerve seemed to be screaming. Every breath was a struggle. Every heartbeat felt labored and uncertain. After experiencing the freedom of existence as pure spirit, being trapped in flesh felt like being buried alive. I could hear voices shouting around me, medical terminology mixed with relief and excitement. Machines were beeping urgently, and I felt the familiar sensation of being in a hospital, though everything seemed muffled and distant. "She's back!" someone yelled. "Strong pulse, blood pressure stabilizing. Catherine, can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You've been in a serious accident." I tried to speak, to tell them about Jesus, about the love I had experienced, about the message I needed to share. But only a weak groan emerged from my damaged throat. The physical recovery was just the beginning. Over the following days and weeks, as my body slowly healed, the greater challenge was integrating what I had experienced with the reality of everyday life. The love I had felt in Jesus' presence remained real and powerful, but it was now filtered through human consciousness, making it sometimes feel like a beautiful dream rather than ultimate reality. The certainty I had experienced about the interconnectedness of all souls was still there, but it competed with the practical demands of insurance forms, medical bills, and caring for my family, transformation, and new purpose. Returning to life after experiencing divine love changed everything about how I viewed myself, my relationships, and my purpose. The questions that had plagued me before, about the meaning of suffering, the reality of God, the significance of my daily work, were replaced by unshakable conviction about the sacred nature of every human encounter. My relationship with David deepened in ways neither of us had expected. Instead of the distant politeness that had characterized our recent interactions, I found myself truly seeing him, not just as the father of my children or my domestic partner, but as a fellow soul on a journey toward understanding. Our conversations became more honest, our connection more genuine. The children noticed the change too. Emma, always perceptive, commented that Mom seemed lighter somehow, less worried about things that didn't really matter. Jake started asking more questions about God and heaven, sensing somehow that I had answers I hadn't possessed before. My work as a pediatric nurse was transformed. Instead of seeing sick children as victims of random biological processes, I began to understand each little patient as a precious soul having a human experience that included both suffering and growth. This perspective didn't eliminate the sadness of seeing children in pain, but it gave that pain meaning and context within a larger story of love and redemption. I found myself better able to comfort grieving families, not with platitudes about God's plan, but with genuine certainty that their children were deeply loved and that death was not the end of their story. Parents who had lost children began seeking me out, somehow sensing that I understood something about what lay beyond physical death. But perhaps the most significant change was in my own sense of mission. I knew I had been sent back for a reason, and that reason became increasingly clear: to help other people remember their divine nature and infinite worth. Sharing the message. The first person I told about my near-death experience was my sister, Jennifer, who had been keeping vigil by my hospital bed during my recovery. She listened with tears streaming down her face as I described meeting Jesus and receiving the message about humanity's need to remember love. "Catherine," she said when I finished, "I've been going through such a dark time in my marriage, wondering if God even cares about my struggles. But hearing your story, it's like you brought back exactly what I needed to hear." That reaction became typical as I began sharing my experience more widely. People who heard my story often said it arrived at exactly the right moment in their lives, when they most needed to be reminded of their inherent worth and the possibility of love overcoming fear. I started speaking at churches, community groups, and eventually at conferences focused on spirituality and healing. The message was always the same: you are loved beyond measure. Your life has meaning and purpose. Every act of genuine kindness contributes to the healing of the world. The response was powerful, but not universal. Some people dismissed my experience as the hallucination of an oxygen-deprived brain. Others accused me of promoting false hope or oversimplifying complex theological issues. A few suggested I was seeking attention or financial gain through my story. But for every skeptic, there were many more who felt their hearts awakened by the message. I received letters from people who had been contemplating suicide but found new reasons to live. Marriages were healed, families reconciled, and individuals discovered purpose they hadn't known they possessed. Living the message daily. The real test of my experience wasn't in the dramatic moments of sharing my story publicly, but in the daily choices of how to live with the knowledge I had received. How do you maintain awareness of the divine nature of every person when you're stuck in traffic, dealing with difficult coworkers, or arguing with your teenager about curfew? I learned that living from a place of love rather than fear is a moment-by-moment choice that requires constant attention and practice. The memory of Jesus' perfect love provided the motivation, but implementing that love in human relationships required developing new habits of thought and behavior. I began each day with meditation, reconnecting with the peace and love I had experienced during my near-death experience. This practice helped me approach daily challenges from a centered place, rather than reacting from stress or anxiety. In my nursing practice, I made more time for simply being present with patients and families, recognizing that sometimes the healing power of genuine attention was more valuable than any medical intervention. I started praying silently for each child I cared for, not asking for specific outcomes, but simply surrounding them with love and light. At home, I worked to create an atmosphere of acceptance and appreciation for each family member's unique journey. Instead of trying to control outcomes or fix problems, I focused on loving David, Emma, and Jake exactly as they were in each moment. The changes weren't always easy. Old habits of worry, judgment, and control died slowly. But the memory of perfect love kept calling me back to higher ways of being, and gradually, these new approaches became more natural and automatic. The ripple effect. One of the most beautiful aspects of living from the place of love I had experienced was witnessing how it affected others. When you truly see another person as a beloved child of God, rather than as an opponent, problem, or inconvenience, it changes the entire dynamic of your interaction with them. Difficult patients became opportunities to practice compassion. Challenging colleagues became teachers showing me areas where I still needed to grow in patience and understanding. Even strangers in checkout lines or traffic jams became chances to radiate the love I had received. David began commenting on how much more peaceful our home felt. Emma started bringing friends over more often, saying they felt safe in our house in ways they couldn't explain. Jake's teacher mentioned that he seemed more confident and kind toward other children. But the ripple effect extended far beyond my immediate family. As I continued speaking about my experience, I began hearing back from people whose lives had been touched by the message. A businessman had changed his priorities, spending more time with family and treating employees more fairly. A teacher had started a program to help struggling students see their own worth and potential. A mother had reconciled with an estranged daughter after years of painful silence. Each story reinforced my understanding of what Jesus had shown me, that love truly is the most powerful force in the universe, and that every person who chooses love over fear contributes to healing the spiritual wounds that separate us from our divine nature and from each other. Challenges and doubts. Living as someone who has experienced divine reality while operating in a largely skeptical world presents unique challenges. There were days when the demands of ordinary life made my near-death experience feel distant and uncertain. During particularly difficult periods, when Jake got seriously ill, when David and I went through a rough patch in our marriage, when work stress felt overwhelming, I sometimes wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. The medical community was generally skeptical of my claims. While my colleagues respected my dedication to patient care, some viewed my public speaking about near-death experiences as unscientific and potentially harmful to families dealing with loss. I learned to be more careful about when and how I shared my story in professional settings. There were also theological challenges. Different religious communities interpreted my experience through their own doctrinal filters, sometimes insisting that I must have encountered a demon rather than Jesus, or that my message was too universally loving and didn't emphasize judgment enough. These challenges taught me important lessons about humility and discernment. I learned to hold my experience as sacred truth for myself while remaining respectful of others' different beliefs and interpretations. I focused on living the love I had received rather than trying to convince skeptics of specific spiritual realities. Most importantly, I discovered that doubt and faith could coexist. Even Jesus' disciples experienced moments of uncertainty. What mattered wasn't perfect certainty, but the willingness to continue choosing love, hope, and service even when the path wasn't completely clear. The continuing mission. As I write this, nearly 8 months have passed since my accident and near-death experience. The memory remains as vivid as ever. But more importantly, the love I experienced continues to transform how I see and interact with the world. My mission feels clearer now than ever: to help people remember their divine nature and infinite worth. This isn't about converting anyone to a particular religion or belief system, but about awakening the love that already exists within every human heart. I continue working as a pediatric nurse, but my approach has been transformed. I see each child not just as a patient with medical needs, but as a precious soul having a human experience that includes both suffering and growth. This perspective allows me to offer comfort and hope even in the most challenging circumstances. At home, David and I have developed a deeper, more authentic relationship based on seeing each other as fellow souls on a spiritual journey rather than just domestic partners managing logistics. Emma and Jake are growing up with an understanding of their inherent worth that I never had as a child. I continue speaking publicly about my experience, not because I enjoy being in the spotlight, but because I feel compelled to share the message I received. Every person who hears about the unconditional love available to them, every individual who begins to recognize their divine nature, every soul who chooses hope over despair, these responses make any criticism or skepticism worthwhile. A message for you: if you've read this far in my story, it's not by accident. I believe that divine love orchestrates encounters between souls who need to connect, even if that connection happens through written words rather than face-to-face conversation. Perhaps you picked up this account because you're going through your own spiritual crisis, questioning whether life has meaning beyond the daily routines and challenges we all face. Maybe you've lost someone you love and you're wondering if consciousness survives beyond physical death. Or possibly you're simply feeling alone in a world that often seems more focused on division than unity. Whatever brought you to my story, I want you to know this: you are loved beyond your ability to comprehend. This love isn't something you need to earn through good behavior or lose through mistakes. It simply is because you are a beloved child of the Creator, formed from the same divine spark that illuminates every star and beats in every heart. Your life matters. Your struggles have meaning. Your capacity for love, no matter how buried it might seem beneath pain, fear, or cynicism, has the power to heal not just your own wounds, but to contribute to healing the spiritual wounds that separate all of us from our true nature. The message I brought back from my encounter with Jesus isn't complicated. Choose love over fear. See the divine spark in every person you meet. Remember that we're all connected at the soul level. Use whatever gifts you've been given, whether it's the ability to comfort, to teach, to heal, to create, to inspire, or simply to listen, in service of helping others remember their own infinite worth. You don't need to have a near-death experience to access this love. It's available right now, in this moment, waiting for you to remember what you've always known, but perhaps forgotten: that you are precious beyond measure, and your presence in this world makes a difference that ripples through eternity. The choice is always yours. In every moment, with every decision, you can choose to be a conduit of love or a barrier to it. You can contribute to the healing of the world or to its further wounding. You can remember your divine nature or remain trapped in the illusion of separation. But know this: no matter what you choose, you remain loved. The divine love I experience doesn't withdraw based on human behavior. It simply waits, patiently and eternally, for each soul to remember who they truly are and return home to the love from which they were never actually separated. My prayer is that my story has helped you remember, even if just for a moment, the magnificent truth of your own divine nature. And if you do remember, I hope you'll help others remember too. Because that's how the world heals. One awakened heart at a time, one act of love at a time, one soul helping another soul remember who they really are. The mission continues, and you're invited to be part of it.